Right.
Yeah.
Can we have a massive round of applause for a subject very close to my heart?
Applauding before we start, that's downhill from there. So, my niece is 3 and she's learning her words. So every time she calls up or every time she visits, she's learned extra words. And last time it was dinosaurs. So she comes around the house and we chased around the house and did rah noises for about 45 minutes and it was brilliant, had lots and lots of fun. But I think in a few years, she's going to think, right, she's got a word, she knows how to talk, she knows how to read, she's done all this stuff, and she's going to sort of stop learning about communication. And I did for about 20 years. I thought, right, okay, I can send an email, I'm good. You know, text got much quicker, words got much shorter, and so on. And I started reading a couple of books just about ways we can continue to improve our communication. It actually got me thinking and got me quite interested on the topic and ways that we can continue to learn, even though, you know, we've learned dinosaur, we've learned dragon, we've learned bear, we've learned pretty much every animal that goes rah. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Pause to read slides. So why is communication important? This is my one statistic and I failed to learn this one. So they did a study of 7,000 doctors and nurses and 84% of them reported that at some point over their day-to-day job, they saw people cutting corners, people making mistakes, errors, and they didn't feel they could speak up about them. They didn't feel they could challenge them. Now, if I was a patient of one of those 84%, I would really want somebody to say, hang on, that's not right. Can you do it properly? Can you, I don't know, use the right gauze or whatever medical people do, I don't know. I would want that challenged because you don't want to make mistakes for your patients. As developers, we don't want bugs and errors in our code to go through. We want to be challenged and we want them to produce the best work we possibly can. So that's what I'd like to talk about today, about how to do that challenge and how to do it slightly diplomatically. So there are three sort of areas I'm going to touch on that are about different styles of communication. One is around how, inspired by the book, Crucial Communication, and about how you can maintain safety in a conversation even when you're talking about some really quite challenging topics. Talk about DISC personality profiles because I love them and they're great and you can use them for communication as well. And then talk about how to drive a new idea into a team of lots of different people using some of the things we talked about before. Cheesy slide. I've not got too many of these, don't I? So one of the first things that I learned when I started reading about this was about the pool of knowledge. So I needed a, hippie meditation pool and so on. So this is kind of what I imagine when they talk about the pool of knowledge, and it's about, sorry, I'm dangling. And they talk about the pool of knowledge. The idea is that when we're having a conversation with a group of people, a conversation in our team, a design conversation, you want to contribute information into this pool. You want to get as much useful knowledge out of everyone's heads and into the pool of meaning so that you can share it, you can discuss the best course of action, you can decide the best design and so on. Anything that stops people contributing into that inhibits the best decision you can make. So when we start feeling nervous, we're feeling like actually we don't want to put something in there, that's a problem because that means actually we're not getting the collective brain of the group. Otherwise, what's the point in having a team? You might as well just everyone work in individual silos and so on. Bad, not going back to those days. So this is the pool of meaning. So when we want to contribute to this, lots of people talk about safety and lots of people talk about, making it safe to fail and to make suggestions. It was in the introduction talk today. So, but I want to give you an example. So these characters are going to pop up quite a bit. So I've got an absolutely great idea for a brand new feature. Oh yeah, that's good. But your last suggestion didn't really work too well. Yeah, okay, yeah, never mind. That could have been the feature that sold us 1 billion extra copies, that made us, 1 million extra customers. That could have been the groundbreaking feature. And because he doesn't feel safe sharing it, you've lost it. Lost safety. A second one. So I've been testing this. I'm really concerned about some of the performance metrics I'm seeing. I'm not happy with this. We don't care about perfectionism, ship it now, get the result. That could have been the one that saved the company, that could have been the one that discredited it, everyone could have gone off the platform, that could have been a major concern. But again, because it never got talked about, that concern never entered the pool of meaning, lost opportunity. There aren't too many of those, don't worry. So the point I want to make is you don't win a conversation, you actually lose it. Because you don't go in trying to persuade somebody of something. You want to get as much information out of this. If you come out with your opinion exactly as it was, that's not a victory, that's a loss, because you've lost the engagement to the other person talking. It's not a battle. Has anyone played Tekken? Years and years ago. I like this because the health bar's at the top. So it's not a battle through, but actually you are using safety as you go through, and somebody might go into the conversation at the start feeling, yeah, actually, I'm quite up for this. I'll say my piece, and that can get eroded through the conversation about people feeling less and less confident about sharing until actually knock out, and they'll just sit in the corner and go, yeah, sure. So this book is absolutely brilliant. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. You can read it in a night. It's So it talks about why you need safety in your team. It talks about having that, the absence of trust. So it's about people attacking people instead of ideas. And if you're not willing to have that conflict and that discussion in a team, it actually means that you never really bought into that result. And this stacks up cumulatively. So if you're never really that concerned whether that was the right design, you're never really going to back it. So you're never really going to invest in it. And that means when it inevitably doesn't happen, well, I didn't really want to do it that way anyway. So by having that conversation at the start, it actually gets the whole team on board and the whole team invested in what they're trying to do, because it's their design, it's a shared ownership, it's a shared decision that we're going to do this. And actually, then you pay attention to what's happening because you're invested in this solution. So yeah, really, really good book. But we want people to challenge us. I said this at the start, we really, really want people to say, not convinced about that, don't do that. Bad idea. I would like to do this. We want people to do that because that's how we stop making a fool of ourselves in public. That's how we stop causing bugs that could bring down the company, could lose our reputation and so on. We want people to be able to challenge us, but we want people to do it in sort of a diplomatic way that doesn't hurt our feelings too much. So there are 2 main things to watch for. When you're talking with somebody and when you're having this conversation, there are 2 main things. People go one way or the other. It's either silent or violent. And I don't mean, going around and starting clubbing people over the head when they disagree with you, but generally you get either yeah, okay, no, fine, not, that's okay. Or it's well, only an idiot would say that. That's a stupid suggestion. It's the attacking the idea, or even worse, attacking the person. I go silent. It drives my wife mad. So yeah, I go to silence. So if I don't feel like I want to have this conversation, I don't want to talk about this now, I start umming and ahhing and start trying to change the conversation and change the topic, and yeah. So an example. So I'm monitoring a serious memory leak in production. I think there's something seriously wrong with the application. Well, our code's working fine. If you cretins bothered to maintain the servers, I bet we wouldn't even have a problem. Possibly a bit of a violent reaction there, a little bit over the top, accusing people, calling names, trying to draw attention away from the fact that actually it couldn't possibly be anything we've done, it's your problem. Kind of the opposite of everything we want DevOpsy, but... So next one, I want to use a recursive algorithm for writing this. Yeah, okay, it's quite a complicated way of doing it. Do you want me to sit with you and work through it? No, it's fine, don't worry. I'll use a loop, it's good. That could have been the right solution, that could have been the way of doing it, and it might have been a good suggestion, but because that person didn't feel like they could share it or they could back it up because they're scared of lady on the right, you've missed out on the better solution because they backed down. One more, good luck. So I need to work late to hit this deadline tonight. Well, that's fine, but don't expect us to pay you overtime just because you can't keep up with the other developers. What? I work twice as hard as those. I did this talk internally, so no swearing. This is so unfair. This company is absolutely ... Maybe a bit of violence, bit of attacking some of the other people on the team, trying to drive the point a little bit too strongly. So the symptoms of silence are violence, because I can't remember all of them. Important ones here is silence isn't just withdrawing from the conversation, but it's also only sharing half of the information. So it's only sharing the good bits of your idea and not necessarily sharing the bits that might undermine your decision. So that's an example of silence, because you're unwilling to contribute. You know, this pool of meaning that we talked about at the start, you're unwilling to contribute more into that pool of meaning because that might make you look like you could possibly be wrong. So that's a form of silence as well. I hope we don't get to threats and force when we're talking about violence, but you know, raising people's voices, actually standing up and saying, I cannot believe that you think that's a good idea. Yeah, you do see that at work. Luckily not for a while, not at TU, I want to say, we're great teams. But I have worked with people who do genuinely raise their voice when they get passionate about something, and that's the way it is actually a show of violence. Labelling. Your ideas are idiotic. I'm not necessarily attacking you, but if you agree, you must also be an idiot. So, we want to have this conversation. We want to have as much information put into this pool of meaning as we possibly can. So, it's kind of the responsibility of everyone to monitor the safety of the conversation and just to help people stay engaged and stay like they're feeling safe. But unfortunately, you can't put words in other people's mouths. So this is entirely on you. You can't persuade other people to talk diplomatically and to try and reassure people, because we're not psychic, unfortunately. So there are two sort of main techniques for rebuilding safety in a conversation. The first one is, if you've said something wrong, sounds silly, apologise. So one from earlier, we talked about serious memory leak in production. I think there's something wrong with the application. The cretins maintaining the servers. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's the application. Can you help me work it out? Apologies are great, but don't overuse them, and don't use them if you're not actually apologising. If you disagree with somebody, don't apologise for disagreeing with them, because that's disingenuous. They're not going to believe you. It's a false apology. It doesn't mean anything. So there's another way of doing this called contrasting, which it has a similar effect of rebuilding this safety, but it's not a direct, I'm sorry, because I've got nothing to apologise for. It's more common in real life. So I want to use a recursive algorithm for this one. Oh, that's quite a complex way of doing it, and so on and so on. He's backing down, he wants to use the loop. We want to rebuild safety because we do think the recursive algorithm route is something that's worth having a look at. So, contrasting. 2 parts then, phrase. The first one is state what you didn't mean, and then actually say what you do mean. Hence contrast, it's one and then the other. So, you know, we're not going to apologise for saying, can I work through it with you, because I think that was actually a nice gesture. I'm saying, no, I didn't mean it was a bad idea. What I actually mean is I just want to make sure we don't get into an infinite loop and cause all sorts of problems. So it's restating what you positively do mean and just downplaying the overreact. And that will help this other person just say, oh yeah, actually come and join me. So another example, can I sit with you, you write your unit tests? Testers wanting to get involved, wanting to see these tests up front, good request. What, you don't trust me? I can write unit tests, I'm a developer, I can do that. Sorry, I came from a dev background, so I'm like, you don't trust me to write my own unit tests? No, nothing at all. I think your unit tests are great, but what I want to do is make sure that we get all the bases covered and all the things. So I'm contrasting. I'm not saying, I think your unit tests are rubbish and I want to make sure you're doing your job properly. It's saying, actually, I want to just work with you to make sure that it doesn't come backwards, and collaboration, all the things we know about. So what's required for safety? There are 2 things that are needed for every, I won't say productive dialogue. The first one is mutual purpose. What are you both actually trying to get out of this conversation? You know, we want the product to succeed. We want a good release. We want so on. The conflict becomes where people have slightly different opinions of how to go about that. So actually stepping into a dialogue and saying, I would like to find the best solution for this design decision because, and understanding what you're both trying to get out of it, and then you can debate the best way of doing it. The second thing is mutual respect. And I know it sounds silly. Attack the idea, don't attack the person. Don't say, you know, don't go, oh, all you sysadmins are cretins who can't maintain the server. It's about, can we have a look to see if the servers are performing? What are you actually trying to achieve? But that's all very well said and done. But what happens if you feel like, actually, you feel a little bit under threat? You're the one who's not feeling safe. It's really hard when somebody's saying, oh, but you're a cretin, you're not maintaining the server. You know, somebody's going on that violent tirade because they don't feel safe in the conversation. How do you actually take a step back and say, yeah, okay, I want to apply contrasting, maybe a small apology, and do all this to try and rebuild it in the heat of the conversation? I can't do that. So, I've been told I need to slow down on this talk, so I've brought a drink. So how do you go about how do you go about making yourself feel calm in this conversation? So I can't remember, I think it was the last atelier I came to. Guys did a fantastic talk upstairs about seeing and monitoring, seeing and hearing how you felt in response to that, how you felt in response to the reaction. Did anyone go to that session? Yeah, it was really, really good. The book Crucial Conversations has a very similar version of it, but it's simplified, and I like simple. So I haven't gone into the full 12-step one, but it's kind of the same idea. So you see and hear, you know, it's receiving the signals, then, you know, you feel an emotion, and then you react to it. There is something that happens in between, probably a bit of a spoiler on the slide, given the big hole, which is you tell yourself a story. So you fill in the blanks, and this is what the guys went into quite a lot of detail last time, but you see and hear, you fill in the gaps in your own mind of what you, to build up the story of what you're listening to, and you react to that story rather than just what you've heard. Game of Thrones? Yeah? I love this quote. Well, I found it, I knew it was the right one. So those who don't watch it, so this is the schemer. He's trying to undermine everyone. Chaos is a ladder, and he's trying to get himself basically on the throne. He won't be happy until he's in charge of everything. So what he's giving some advice to one of the characters, and he's saying that whenever somebody does anything and I'm trying to work out their motives, I try and work out absolutely what is the worst motivation they could have for trying to say and do what I'm seeing. And I think we do that because when somebody says something like, oh, your application's running a bit slow in production, you're saying I write bad code. Are you saying I didn't do the performance testing on this properly? You say we're filling in the gaps around it, even though actually that's not what they're saying. You know, suddenly this is a personal attack, not a calm, logical, can you help me? I've got a problem here and you're the expert. Generally, there are 3 types of stories, and I've tweaked this one slightly. So the book talks about the victim. Woe is me, all this bad stuff just keeps happening to me. How is one person so unlucky? How do we get breaking build servers? How do we get failing units? How can all this stuff happen to one person? The next story is the villain. My boss, if only he'd just give me a little bit of space, if only he'd listen to me, if only he'd... So, casting somebody as a real villain in your mind. And the final one is helpless. So there is absolutely nothing I can do to get out of this situation. So many bad things are going wrong and I am just completely powerless in this world. So I gave this presentation in-house a few weeks ago, and one of the things that we were really struggling with is actually we thought the first one and the third one were very, very similar, you know, because bad things keep happening to you and you're helpless about it. And the more and more we talked about it, we actually decided they were kind of the same ones. And we put in imposter syndrome as a very good reason why somebody might be possibly behaving a little bit irrationally. Maybe this could motivate somebody as well, which is great because this ties in with Beth's talk upstairs. So I'm really glad we talked about that one. So this is the idea that, you know, actually, why is somebody... I'm an imposter in this situation, and that, yeah, you're coming to me for technical help, but I don't really feel confident here. It's undermining me. So that could be the story in your or my, oh, maybe I aced my interview, but yeah. So that could be another reason why you're feeling unsafe. The way to break this is to try and complete the story. So the idea is if you're the victim trapped away in a tower and your boss is a villain and is constantly undermining you and giving you a hard time and really on top of you, micromanaging you, is it possible the princess is actually a bit of an ogre? And is it possible that maybe, just maybe, you have maybe missed a few deadlines, and that's why they're becoming the villain in your mind, because everyone's the hero of their own story, right? Everyone thinks that, oh, well, it couldn't possibly be me. A friend of mine did a talk about cognitive dissonance, and this is brilliant. It really, really upsets people when people have this story in their head about a bad cop, about a villain, a bad boss or something like that, even though they can be missing every deadline. Well, that's because my boss doesn't trust me, so, why should I try? And it becomes a cycle, and it gets worse and worse and worse. The idea of cognitive dissonance is you will completely ignore anything that undermines your view of the world. So it's used to explain all sorts of things. Smoking over drinking is a good example because, I'm only smoking a little bit because it helps me with my stress for my exams, but I'm not really addicted. You can tell yourself all these crazy sort of stories. I've just insulted every smoker in the audience. I'm very sorry. So, it's the idea that actually you will dismiss anything that doesn't support your worldview. And if one of your views is one of these three stories, you will filter out all the information that you can to stop it being disrupted. So the way to feel calmer about a situation, and this is, I've never been able to do this in a conversation itself, but when you can come back to it a little while later and say, yeah, okay, maybe I was a little bit out of line there, maybe I was a bit of an ogre. Finishing your own story is a really good way to just sort of calm down, explain it, see it. Is somebody telling this story about me? Is somebody making me the villain? So on. So the flip side of this you can use this for is, well, you're talking to somebody and you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and you're trying to say, they're suddenly getting really emotional. You might be talking about, no, I wouldn't do it with a left join. What I'd do is I'd connect it this way, or I'm trying to think of a good testing analogy, but this is where I'm, I wouldn't use Jenkins for this test tool because we use this other thing and it's far, far better. And they absolutely flip the lid and they turn and say, what do you mean I've spent loads of time on this? Is it possible that they're reacting to that because they're telling themselves one of these three stories? Maybe you're the villain who's come into this new company and they've done like this for years and it's been absolutely fine. And you're saying, oh no, everything we used to do was better. Is it possible that they're feeling helpless in the situation? Right, okay, yeah, I would much rather use that, but I can't because of all this regulatory stuff and all this background technology that this person doesn't know. So that's quite possible. Is it that they feel like an imposter and they've staked what they feel is their reputation on using this particular technology, and you're coming in and you're telling them it's all wrong? That would get a good reaction out of me as well. So trying to recognise these stories in other people can help explain why they're apparently behaving irrational, but why they're reacting so emotionally strongly to something that that you might have said that you're having a nice dialogue here, you're all contributing to the pool of meaning, and suddenly they just flew off the rails. So this was the slide I changed last night. So this is really quite hard, and some it's quite easy, but the idea is that to actually look at something from somebody else's point of view is a lot harder than we might think. Yeah, it's a completely different story. I'm really glad that worked on the other laptop. So actually, if you flip something over and look at it from somebody else's point of view, maybe you are the villain, but maybe you're being the villain because actually you've got a sense of imposter syndrome, that actually you want to be very assertive in your new role or whatever, and actually you just come across as, leave that sentence there. So let's look at a previous conversation we had. So the one about wanting to work late, and this guy, he's helpless, he's a victim, he's working so hard to try and carry this company and to get it through, and this company is so unfair. Naturally, he's reacting with a bit of violence. He's quite upset about this situation. So, contrasting. We want to... No. So, this guy's going to contrast. Sorry, I thought she was going to contrast. So, no, I'm not trying to drag out the project. I'm not doing this for the overtime. What I want to do is make sure we get a good quality release when it actually goes out the door, saying what we don't want, saying what we do want. Suddenly got a slightly better reaction rather than accusations about not wanting to keep up with other developers. Now we've got, what can I do to help? We can't run over budget, but can I help? Can I do some of the manual testing? Can I follow some of the test scripts? We're back in dialogue. We're back having a constructive conversation. So This book is brilliant. It's probably one of the best books I read last year. So this goes into this way more detail than I have, and it talks about different methods of making decisions, and it talks about really goes into the different stories and how to disrupt them. I highly recommend you put it on your reading list. So the second thing I want to talk about was about the personality profiles, about trying to deliver a message that people actually care about. So we're doing our contrasting. We're saying that okay, we don't want to. I don't want to milk overtime. What I want to do is get a good result for the whole company and make sure we get a good quality release. The way you deliver that feedback is actually there are different ways of doing it which have a much more dramatic effect on some people than others. So actually understanding who you're talking to and tailoring your message to them has a much stronger impact. So has anyone seen this before? So there are loads of these out there. There's one about blue planets and things as well. It's all about different personality profiles. This is the one I found first and sort of like, so I use this one. The idea is that we are all primarily one of these four. We do have a smattering of others. I sort of imagine it a bit like a pie chart where you might have one segment that is one. That sounded well. You might be more dominant and less of an influencer. You might be more conscientious and less of a steadiness. And these are different personality types that you take from. What's interesting is these actually change depending on whether you're at work or whether you're at home. So I feel at work I'm quite a dominant person. I focus on results. I care about, right, we need to have this ready by that. And, sometimes don't care that much about who I upset in the process, hence the irony of the talk and wanting to do a little bit more of this. Sometimes come across as quite front-willed. At home, I'm much more of a steadiness. I withdraw from the conversations because actually I don't want to upset anyone. I'm more about keeping calm, keeping happy. And you also have a slightly different one when you're under stress. So I become a very conscientious rule follower when I'm feeling stressed out or so. But the idea is that generally you fall into one of these with complementary things. So the dominants are the getting the results. They're we will achieve our goals, and this is all we're focused on. That's what matters. Ends justify the means, sort of thing. The influencers care very much. I've gone for Worf because we're going Star Trek, but classic salesperson, dare I say. These are the people who, care about the reputation. They care about, what other people think of us. They want to make sure that we're well thought of in the industry. The conscientiousness are the rule followers. They're the logical thinkers. This is the process and this is how we should follow it because this is best practice. This is, the way that all these industry leaders agree we should be doing it. So this is how we should do it. Steadiness is very much about goodwill, team feeling, making sure that we are, everyone feels there's no point in achieving our victory if we've just upset and fired and got rid of all the people we're working with. They're interested in keeping the team together. They're interested in that goodwill. So this is our first challenge. So you're Captain Kirk and you've met the Romulans and you want to say something to Captain Kirk that will prevent him just from opening fire and starting intergalactic war. So I would suggest that maybe the best thing to say to him isn't to suggest that if we attack first, we might hurt the Romulans' feelings. He's a very results focused. He wants to get us for the mission. Upsetting the Romulans really isn't high up his lists of things to avoid. He's not that fussed about it. But so have we got any Trekkies in the room? Does this? Yeah. So Worf is all about his honour. He's all about the reputation. He wants to make sure that he's that they're well thought of. I feel like I'm doing peer pressure. So yeah, he's very thought. He won't he won't attack somebody who's unarmed. He won't so on. So how do you stop Worf from firing phasers on this Romulan? And the answer is you talk about what will the world think of us if we attacked this unarmed vessel? What will that's a smirch on your honour. People will never think of you the same again, and so on. So a little bit contrived, but you need the extreme character types to sort of show this. The best one I ever saw for steadiness was Winnie the Pooh, because he just cared about making friends with everyone, but it wasn't really that focused about goals, unless it involved honey. Nieces. So Chris is a C personality type. He's very logical. He's very rule following. He's interested in, right, we are going to follow the best practice to do this. So I want to talk to you about the last team meeting. So this is a one-to-one situation, and he's maybe getting a little bit of coaching that maybe he wasn't as receptive in this conversation as maybe he thought of. Bear in mind, these are logical people, so they tend to go in with already thinking, oh, well, this is the way you want to do it because this is the pattern described in X, Y, and Z. They've thought this through. So, yeah, of course, I thought this meeting went really well. Yeah, but you didn't interrupt your colleagues a few times. I'm not sure we really heard all the viewpoints, so we're trying to coach for this big pool of meaning. Well, there's only one way to do it, really. Besides, if they don't talk, then they're obviously not too worried about the outcome. Right. Maybe it's time to tailor the message a little bit. Maybe it's time to just deliver a message in a way that they'll appreciate. So, yeah, but best practice really says that we need everyone involved in design discussions. We really don't want an idea locked away in somebody's head. Right, oh, we're breaking best practice now. The rules say everyone contributes. Well, that's their problem, is it? I can't be expected to speak for them. Yeah, that got a rise. A little bit of violence, not overly happy. It's their fault they're not doing it. So, restore some safety. I'm not saying you're deliberately talking over them or shutting people down. We just want to make sure we get the best we get the best design we possibly can. Make sense? Listen, do more. So it's about tailoring the message to the person you're talking to. If you can work out where they fit on that 4-box grid of whether somebody's very results focused, whether they're worried about, another take on this conversation might be if somebody's very team based, you might have really upset somebody by talking over them. But if you tell that to Captain Kirk, he's really not going to be that fussed. The idea of not getting the best design or actually potentially introducing a major bug, that would impact somebody with a dominant personality. This is the podcast I used for a lot of this. There are different resources. I think there's a whole disc consultancy. You can get people in and pay them a fortune. These guys talk about it in relation to quite a few other things. So they talk about, one-to-ones and giving feedback in a way that actually people care about by relating it to their values. So yeah, that's pretty good. Right, where am I on time? So driving technical change. So this is about strategy. So okay, we can have conversations now. We can influence people. We know how to get the most out of our conversations so people don't just go to silent or violent. We've talked about how to appeal to their values because this is the outcome that they want. So this is about how do you actually deliver your message to a team strategically, so you don't just blunder and say, oh, well, I think we should do this and just get shut down. We're going to do some stereotypes in this, I'm afraid. The reason is this is the best way of doing it. I'm not suggesting we have anyone who is completely uninformed about anything, but by trying to identify the stereotypes, it gives you tools for relating to them. Same way as the DISC profiles. Nobody's 100% dominant, nobody's 100% conscientious, and so on. It just gives you a few tools based on what the defining characteristics of that person is in this situation. So the uninformed is they've simply not heard of your fantastic, great idea. If they had, they'd probably be doing it. Straightforward as that, really. The herd. So these guys, actually, they don't really mind whether we use TeamCity or TFS. They'll go with the flow. It's not something they've particularly got a stake in. They're happy either way. The burned. That's the best picture of skeptical I could find, by the way. That's why it's a baby. So the burned is somebody who's tried something a bit like yours before. So maybe they used N unit and you're proposing X unit. And, well, no, it didn't really work out last time. It's not... I don't want to go down that route again. I lost weeks. This is where the horror stories come out, right, of why this is such a terrible idea, because they've been there, they've done it, so on. Time crunched. Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. However, I've got this 47 emails to do. I've got to performance test that. I've got to do some security testing. I'll come back to you later. Probably all work with a few of those. Probably been a few of those at times. The boss. Don't know why the baby's in the... So the boss is, okay, right, that sounds like an absolutely fantastic thing. Really? Is it worth the effort? Is it worth the effort we're going to put in to convert to this new technology, to bring in this new process, spin up these new servers? The cynic. I've worked with a few of these as well. It doesn't matter what your idea is. These guys will disagree with you. There's often no logical reason. They will find a reason, and it's much easier to discredit an idea than it is to present it, because if you're trying to suggest something, particularly as a prototype, saying, hey, I think this is an absolutely great idea, the burned will come and say, right, yeah, watch out for this pitfall. The cynic will say, yeah, well, that's a waste of time. Oh, and they'll find one crack in your argument and blow it out of all proportion so it won't happen. So, yeah. So, the Jedi mind trick. How do we influence these people? Because we want to get them on board to try and, because we've obviously got this great idea which would benefit the team, it would hit all our results. How do we, start convincing all these people that we want them on our side and to back our suggestion? These guys are easy. Start with them. So, the uninformed, inform them. Tell them about this technology they're missing out on that can make their life so much easier. The herd, generally, tell them, oh, well, so-and-so said this, Get their support early on, because they're the easiest ones to convince. And actually, if you're in a scrum team of 7 or 8, and you've got 2 of these behind you, well, that's 3 out of 8 already. So, yeah, works well. The burned. This is where all the things we talked about earlier really come into play. We talked about mutual purpose. We talked about monitoring safety. This guy or lady could save you a whole lot of time, could save you a lot of pain, because if they've done what you're already trying to do, learn from the experience. Don't go into that conversation as a battle to win, the health bars at the top. Go in of, actually, they might talk you round, that actually this isn't the best idea since sliced bread, and this might be something we want to learn from. Equally, they might be really relieved that you've come up with this new idea, and you might have the solution of what they did wrong. So, yeah, use all your conversation techniques from earlier on to talk to these guys. The time crunched. Again, quite straight. Show how the idea you're trying to propose will make their life easier. If somebody's running around like a headless chicken, okay, might be a time management issue, but it might also be a process issue. Show how what you're trying to propose for the team will help this person out. Automation, test automation, improve DevOps pipelines so we don't have to do security testing each time because it's being built in with our tests. Yeah. The boss. So this is about value, and it's about, okay, yeah, that sounds like an absolutely fantastic idea. Is it worth 6 months if we're not going to get any extra revenue from it? So this is about actually, honestly, looking at your idea and thinking, what value will it bring to the team versus how much effort will it take to implement? Because this guy's almost your gatekeeper of saving the team wasting a whole lot of time. So if you can genuinely put together a high-level argument of how this will help the team overall and when it will buy back value, the graphs about it takes this amount of effort and you get the productivity after this time, that sort of thing. Yeah, have a few of those. Bosses love graphs. The cynic. So, you're never going to convince this guy. However, it is much harder to pick holes in a working example. So if you're trying to bring in a new technology, you're trying to build in a new integration server, you want to use Kubernetes for testing or something like that, demo it, prove that it works, bring it to the conversation and say, oh, by the way, this is how I've done it, this is not production ready, but it shows it at least works. It's much harder to pick a fault in something that's working in front of people. Also, there's a reason this guy's at the end. Because once you've got, your 8 members of the Scrum team, by the time you've got the boss on board, the herd on board, the uninformed on board, who else do we have? The time crunched, and the burned, and you've learned from the mistakes in the burned. Yeah, actually, is this a bit of a losing battle? You're never going to convince him anyway, but by that point, you've already got your majority. Listen to some of them, use your conversation techniques. Don't go in assuming you know all the answers. But, yeah, I don't like the cynic. It's a pain. And I think, so that's planning the strategy. That's going through and talking about how you want to go through those people in order. So that is all, yeah, driving technical change. I think it's on Pragmatic Programmer. Really, really good book. How are we doing on time? I ran through this in half an hour last time, so I'm doing slightly better. I can tweet afterwards if you want and put the names of the books on if that would help people. I'll put the slides up and I'll put the book recommendations on, so don't worry. So, wrapping together. So, the goal of the dialogue is to contribute to the pool of meaning, but to do that, you need to find what the mutual purpose is. So, going into a conversation, if you're trying to push a particular unit testing tool or you're trying to push a particular pen test organisation or something else, just remember what the mutual purpose is for the team. Why are we meeting to pick this one? Do you want that pen tester or do you want a good pen tester? What is actually the mutual purpose that you're trying to get out of the conversation? And then, remember that you're actually trying to have dialogue with these people. You're not trying to force, that slide at the start about trying to win the conversation, no such thing. So that's the point of all the conversations. Yes, there are strategies and yes, there are techniques, and sometimes it comes across as a bit manipulative when you think about it, but it's not. It's about having a strategy of how you want to talk to somebody. It's about maintaining that conversation, but it's an open dialogue. Be prepared to be convinced, because otherwise it's not a dialogue, it's an argument, and it's preaching. The final slide is a quote. So they say you need to wrap up a talk with what you started on, which is great, because then I get to talk about my nieces again. So Annalisa called up the other day, and we're on FaceTime, and she says, "I've been to the hairdryer, Uncle Adam." Okay. She's been for a haircut. She said, it was brilliant. Aren't I a great grown-up girl now? Isn't it pretty? And so on. She spent about 10 minutes telling me all about the hairdryer and how he'd had sweets and all sorts. The point is that actually she'd learnt a new word. She hadn't got it right. She was getting hairdryers and hairdressers mixed up. Who cares? With a little bit of extra knowledge, that whole conversation goes on a lot more. So you don't need, I've whistled through and recommended books. There's probably 1,000 pages of reading of what has gone through. You don't need it all in your head. Actually, incremental improvements on this and improvements from just one person in a conversation, just actually looking and thinking, why is that person not contributing? Why is that person talking about it being, that's an idiotic idea? Those few changes can really, really improve a collective decision. Don't feel like you have to stick it all in head at one. I've read a lot of these fairly recently, so I'm starting to apply some of these and starting to see the value. But don't feel you need to take everything away and start going through rehearsing stories in your head within 2 minutes of walking out. But that's me. Anyone? Any questions? Thank you. Yeah.
So I've got a question. How do you think this communication methods work when you're not all co-located?
It's hard. It's really hard. Because if you can interpret a text message or a Skype message the wrong way, you will. Well, it's almost back to the Peter Baelish bit of trying to interpret the stories. It's even harder. So I know you're London and Leeds as well, which is challenging. It's even harder when there's significant geographical and cultural differences between the two, because what you say in one place might not, it might mean something completely different. I would say the same principles do apply. I mean, we're all fundamentally wired in fairly similar ways, but it's much, much harder to get that genuine conversation. It's also much harder to pick up on the cues, because is somebody going to silence because they've got their Skype muted, or are they or are they just really busy and critical emails come in that they need to do because something's burning in production? So it's harder there. Video's good. Teams either go one way or the other. They either love video or they hate video. But video helps, because then you can see if somebody's not paying attention, or you can see whether they're checked out because they're not engaged. Not paying attention is it's another way of going to silence, because they're not engaging, because they don't feel they can't contribute. It's possible something's burning down, but more often it's because they're not feeling like they're contributing to the conversation. So there are tools, but I credit it is a lot harder.
I was wondering because you were saying about how you have to kind of monitor the meeting and notice if these things are happening. What's your suggestion if, say, for example, you're not involved in a conversation, you are, but you can see that there's, for example, a developer and a product owner, and the product owner's trying to make a point, and then the developer's just kind of going violent, and then the product owner's going silent. is there a way for you to kind of step in and go, okay,
yeah,
stand up, please? Like, without also sounding patronising?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in that situation at the moment because I'm not working as part of a team at the moment because I'm working as a development manager, but I kind of have the flip side that actually the team are very safe and are generally willing to say, I can say that because lots of them are here, they are quite willing to tell each other when they're being idiots and when, no, that's a stupid suggestion or you know, and have that frank conversation. I think I will go back to the, you know, the mutual respect, mutual purpose. Because, right, what are we trying to achieve? So yes, somebody's going silent or violent, but actually to reassure, no name calling, and that's quite hard to, that's inappropriate, that's quite a hard call out, but actually I would focus on the mutual purpose of saying, right, okay, so we've got two different suggestions here. Do they both meet our mutual goals? State explicitly what we're trying to achieve from the conversation, because that way you're almost sort of reminding people that they are on the same side, rather than saying, people get bogged down and discussions get detoured. When you start going to violence in particular, you stop arguing about the conversation you're trying to have and you start arguing about something else, about whether you're a cretin or not, or whether it's... So actually, by restating what are we trying to achieve, people remember they are on the same side. And it just helps lift the tone of the conversation a little bit away from, well, that's a stupid idea. Well, what do you know? You know, does that help?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Completely different question, sorry. And how have you thought about how this might factor in with mental health as well?
I haven't, but it's really good. So the biggest thing I've been thinking about this was the impostor syndrome came in like within a couple of days. So it's a real nice synergy we had there. But I think there's a lot more private coaching to be done as well, because not everyone wants to contribute openly. I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, and it would depend very much on the symptoms. I would say, you know, sorry. No, it's fine. I would say negative feedback, constructive feedback is a private thing. And I think that would be equally more important when somebody's struggling with an issue like that. I've also seen mental health conditions where people almost flip styles. So, you know, one day they might be on a high and they might be really, really engaged. They might come across as an I or a D personality, very, very driven. And the other day they might be so insular they don't want to contribute.
I'm thinking more around the whole, like, you know, it might be harder to coach someone out of being silent if they're feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I was more thinking on that.
Yeah. I think the techniques still apply. I mean, I should put my hands up and say I've absolutely no mental health training, but I think a lot of the same techniques still apply, because a lot of this is about building your own confidence, about being able to contribute but not shutting other people down. And actually just reminding people that, you know, some people just are happy listening. You know, that is absolutely fine. It's not like every person needs to stand up and draw their own design on the... Some people don't want to do that. And that's fine, and not pushing people too far out their comfort zone. Appreciating the different people have different styles. But I think if somebody's feeling like, you know, with anxiety or with depression or something like that, like they can't, then that's where that sort of... It's almost super critical that you've got that safe environment. And I think that's easier said than done, if that makes sense. Does it? That's another book I need to read. I need to find out more about that. Yeah?
Yeah, so it's kind of very similar to cynic, but that kind of dismissive personality as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got an idea, it's not necessarily shut down, but kind of passed over.
Yep.
To the point where it's not even registered to that person. How would you sort of approach that, you think? Without kind of calling out the fact that someone may have just kind of passed over your idea or anything like that?
Yeah, that's hard. So, working examples work well with cynics, but equally, it depends very much who this cynic is. I mean, if there's some sort of, you know, if they're an authority figure, sometimes you just have to remember, ultimately, at the end of the day, they pay my wages. But there's also a time investment in things like, you know, all the stuff we've talked about, but becoming practical examples, there are there is a time investment in it, which the boss will constantly be looking at and saying, hang on, what are you doing if there's no value at all? It would depend very much on what your relationship with the cynic is, I think. It's much, much harder when that cynic is in a senior role. And it's almost, this is where you need the role, you almost need a mediator. I've been in examples before where my peers, and I've really, really struggled, and I've been batting my head against the wall. I've found it so, so difficult. And you just wish somebody would come in and say, shh, go. It doesn't tend to happen. But yeah, I think, I'm not sure I'm really answering the question, but I do understand the pain. So is that, I'm hoping you're going to...
Have you worked in an environment with Scrum? Because it sounds like a lot of the things that you suggested is something that a Scrum Master might bring to the team?
Yeah, so we do work in Scrum teams at TU, and I've worked at teams that maybe think they're Scrum, but... so yeah, the Scrum Master kind of works as that mediator as well, and just making sure. I have thought about a lot of this with Scrum in mind, sort of first and foremost, because the collaborative design and the backlog refinement sessions are a great example of when you need a lot of this stuff, and that's when you can have that sort of arbiter. There are also techniques you can use. So one of the ones I'm very interested in but have never done is do a gallery style of sort of decision making. And the idea is that everyone goes away in private and everyone sort of sketches their own, right, this is how I would solve this problem. And then anonymously they're all posted and people can go around and comment and dot vote on different bits. And that way it takes the role power out of it. Again, you can suggest it. It could come across as quite a time-consuming one, and also your cynic would then immediately start sort of shutting you down. So, well, that's a waste of time because, So yeah, there are a few different techniques that aren't necessarily just standing around having a conversation that can help facilitate a decision where all viewpoints are met.
Just a suggestion to support that, have a look at liberating structures.
Okay.
Because that will help drive those conversations out.
I've read Sprint. So I was going to say the goal. No, completely different. Sprint. It's done by Google investors, and they've got loads and loads of different techniques of coming up with a prototype in a week, and it's got quite a few different decision-making techniques in there that aren't just, the standard show of hands. Do you need consensus? Do you have a nominated decision maker? Do you have, and working through it like that. Having a bit of a structure when you're going into those conversations can help. But yeah, I don't have a lot of practical experience with them. Dot voting's good though, I like that. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much, guys.